Well, hello there, everyone. It's Christy. That seems like a good place to change over. And how's my sound? Yeah, my sound is looking okay. How are you guys doing? I'm still setting up my show. As we speak, I am making sure the interface is set up correctly and that my hair looks kind of cute in the camera and that everything is good. So how are you guys doing? I hope that you are having a good time wherever it is, whenever it is you are. Welcome to Weekend Winters, and we are here to, well, I guess waste a little bit of time on a Sunday. So, let me just have a look here. Make sure the chat window is working. There we go. We'll do the... Hey, there you go. Can see you guys. That's fantastic. All right, what I have lined up today is... all right, so first of all, hello to my Sunday chat. You guys are the people that I show up for. The people who watch later too, because of the time zone and whatever. But on my comments last time, someone complained. Now, to be fair, I don't think their criticism was entirely warranted. But they did have this complaint that just doing PragerU every week is a little bit boring, which I sort of get, and they wanted more politics. To be honest, I did talk about politics last week, before and after the PragerU video, but in the spirit of, two things. Taking on criticism, I'm going to try to change up the show a little bit and put some politics at the front this week. Also, F you to the person, like not entirely, but here's the thing. When people complain about the content their creators put out, I get up on a Sunday morning and I do this for free. So there's a whole a lack of responsiveness or seriousness because I'm doing this on my own time and I don't spend half the show asking for money or encouraging super chats. I mean, I don't want to diss anyone who does that because this isn't my living. But when people are giving you free content, just sometimes shut up and say thank you. So, with that said, I'm going to also take aboard that criticism. And we're going to do some bookmarks at the start of the show to get things going. But we will dunk on PU because that's just fun. And I like doing that. Oh, I guess I'm going to swap over so you can see me. Because before we get going on anything serious, yes, it is autumn. It's actually approaching winter here, I think, in terms of seasonal stuff. In the next... Well, no, I guess the winter solstice isn't until December, but days are getting shorter. It's definitely getting colder, and I'm going to move my mic a little bit so you can see my face a bit more. I think the sound should still be fine, but I got new pajamas and I refuse to get out of them. I absolutely refuse to get out of them. I've been wearing them all week, and it's just, look at this. If I was in a snowstorm somewhere and I completely needed to be covered up in order to survive, I could totally put this. Can you still hear me when I do that? Tuck myself up. If I just need clothespins. Actually, I have a clothespin. All right, let's see if we can do. All right, ready to go? There we go. I think I might need a second clothespin, but technically, if someone just jumped in to the middle of the show to see me like this, oh, that would be hilarious. So, but anyway, it's like wearing a cloud. It's got a really nice high neck line, and it's already got a folded thingy here, so it naturally wants to cuddle your neck area, and a really good size hood, and also it's got an internal, you call it a muff, thing where you can put your arms in. So I'm very happy. It is super comfy, and yes, and it was on sale as well. So always a good deal when things are on sale. Well, not always a good deal, but it's a better deal. And so if you see me in this a lot on the Sunday, it's because I can't bring myself to actually take off my pajama top. I'm going to have to, probably wash this on a really regular basis. Anyway, that's nonsense. But hopefully you were entertained by that nonsense. Let me look and see what you guys are saying in the chatsies. I see Lion Kitty's a little bit in the way, so before I switch the screens, I'm going to go ahead and move Lion Kitty. All right, so, and there I am in the corner, very high up. But what do you guys have to say in the chat? 11 a.m. in the UK and struggling to motivate yourself out of bed, don't if you don't have to. Why get out of bed if you don't have to? Like, it's the one day you don't have to get out of bed. Why get out of bed? That's what I think anyway. Now, personally, I was up at 8:30 this morning because I had to do video editing for work. So I already did like about 2 hours worth of video editing this morning. And so I didn't have, but yesterday I had a lie-in. Before I raised my arms, you thought I was wearing a towel. I wouldn't blame you. That's it would have been probably a very good guess. Struggling today, brain's doing a big sad. Oh, well, hopefully like just absorb, just like come into the show and focus on that and just have a suspension of your own connection with where you are emotionally. It's boring because I keep recommending boring PU videos. Oh, Tufity, don't take that blame on yourself. All PU videos are potentially boring because they're all a bunch of nonsense. So I don't blame you, and I don't blame myself. I blame a little bit PragerU, but I did learn a little bit last week. I mean, I always learn fact-checking. This is the thing. I always learn something fact-checking a PragerU video. There are some things that I remember, I recall when they say something ridiculous. There's usually something in my mind going, that doesn't sound right, because I remember a counterfactual, or I remember it differently. And so it is, in that way, learning to rebut it or going through to rebut it becomes an educational experience. So don't take that blame on Tufity. That's not on you. Mithril, you rarely complain about content. Thank you very much. And I just want to say also a big shout out and thanks to, it's not that you complain, but I don't mind necessarily requests, but it was just phrased in this sort of way oh, Christy, I really like you on the happy hour, but your PU videos every week, it's just really boring. You should talk about politics. And I'm like, but I talked about politics before and after. Anyway. Let's see, I'm just going to go through a few more of the comments before going on to the bookmarks, which I've prepared and did background research for last night and this morning while I was eating breakfast, because that's how much I care about you guys. Yes. Oh my gosh, that is a mood. Are you talking about my fuzzy thing? If you were, I don't know if you were, but it is a mood. Why do people wear clothes to bed? Well, I know that I, in the summer, wear very little in the way of clothing when it's hot because I don't like the heat. Why would you cover up with more? But in the winter, I not only wear, actually, okay, I don't have them spare, but all right, you guys are going to see how flexible I am. I don't have matching ones but anyway, I also have these big fuzzy socks on as well, which have fake lamb stuff on the inside. And I'm wearing socks underneath these. So mostly it's to keep my feet warm when I walk on cold floors. That's why I wear clothes. Why? They call it a muff. That's what she said. Yes, exactly. What else do you guys have to say? Pretty much eternally summer here in Hawaii. I do. I kind of wish I would have grown up someplace that had only warm weather. Because I'm going to be honest, I don't do well in the cold. I do not like the cold very much at all. Heat waves won't help the fires in the middle of one. I know it's pretty much like fire season all the time in California now. We're literally burning up the planet with climate change. It's really terrifying. I wear close to bed because my mom likes to burst in to wake me up. Yeah, it's probably good to be covered in those. Although, to be fair, she's going to be bursting in your room. Maybe being naked a couple times would get her to knock before she comes bursting. So I'm just saying, learn to knock on the door and ask first. Been watching a cool astronomy vid this morning. That's cool. Science nerd. I approve. How are the PU breakdowns not political? I think they're all political in some way because they're all advancing an agenda to protect white power supremely and to justify it. And this is another thing, just sort of segueing into what we're going to be talking about today. The thing that concerns me about, it's always been in front of my face. It's just not something I paid attention to before. But that white guys who are fascist, hard right, far right fascists, promoting anti-democratic policies and worldviews, get much less criticism, in my opinion, because they are white men. Like somehow it's okay for with the mass shootings, and when it's a mass shooter who's a white guy, then suddenly he's got a mental illness. It's that whole thing. It's covering up. People didn't believe Richard Spencer was so bad. He wasn't so violent because he was well spoken and had a nice haircut, kind of fashionable haircut that made him look slightly respectable. And then they were surprised when he comes out with virulent, hateful, violent, raging comments. And white men just have this, and white women too, but in terms of the movement, the far right is patriarchal, so women are tokens more than leaders. Women are put up there as shields, as skirts to hide behind, not as equal members of the community. And as a consequence, if Kevin McCarthy were, a black person talking about black liberation, he would be on an FBI watch list. But when the Republicans in Congress are mouthing Russian talking points and attacking the results of our own intelligence agencies, somehow that's okay. When black people want to criticize and work against the structural systems that are oppressing them, that's being a little too uppity. But white guys who want to give a pass to a rich guy that's their buddy with the evangelicals, that's okay. And yeah, it embarrasses me how long it's taken me to see the fact that there are important differences between apartheid South Africa and America. Mostly that apartheid was a explicitly legal structure, and in America, our white supremacist track that keeps especially conservative Christian men in positions of power is as powerful in dividing societies and keeping people relegated to the margins. We just like to couch it in the language of opportunity, so that way you can blame people who are in poor circumstances and are unable to rise above them. You can blame them for their circumstances by looking at a few cases of people who were able to get out. But anyway, I am so that's my get woke cock sucker. Okay, demonetized. There goes the Sunday show today. So much for that. And yeah, I'm just moving the screen over here a little bit. I guess I could have gone big this whole time. But yeah, let's have a look. I just moved the camera over because I was doing a lot of talking and then realized actually I probably should have gone over to the Twitter feed. So before I just go over to Twitter, I will check you guys one more time. What do you have to say here in terms of comments? And I'm in the way, so I'll just look at the top ones. No, you guys I think are just having a chat. No one else is tagging me. That's something I look for. All right, so let's have a look at my bookmarks. You guys can kind of come along as I do a bookmark thing like I do with Kevin. And how far are we into the show? How long did it take me to actually... only 15 minutes to get going with substance. That's not so bad. Although I'm seeing now in the screen that I've got it set up that... that's funny. You're going to have a hard time sort of seeing some of the things on the bookmarks. So I'll move that over that way. That should be better for you. Though that being said, I am in the corner in a kind of an awkward way. So I'm going to just do one more thing on screen to sort of, bam, there we go. I bookmarked things for the Sunday show because the impeachment news rolls on, my friends. You might be taking the weekend off, but there is still impeachment news coming out, and there is still impeachment activity going on, and things are being discovered. It's pretty amazing, to be honest, how quickly all of this is happening and the pace at which they're keeping up with it. So can I just give a little bit of an assessment here, a background, before I get going into the most recent revelations. If we think about it, what this investigation started off with was the July 25th, I think it was, everyone keeps saying it, I should have it memorized by now, the July phone call between Trump and the president of Ukraine, where he brought up, in the context of official White House, diplomatic call, CrowdStrike, a wild, unsupported conspiracy theory that somehow alleges Ukraine was really behind the 2016 election, and the conspiracy is designed to exculpate Russia from what we know is its activity. The Internet Research Agency, we all know about it. We've all experienced the bots on Twitter. They're not Ukrainians, they're Russians. And that was what kicked all of this off in July. We're in November already, but that aside. So we got this whistleblower report a couple weeks later, I think early end of July, or it must have been August. And then Trump, to defend himself, went on the south lawn of the White House and repeated his offer to the Ukraine that they should investigate a private American citizen for the crime of running against him for president, apparently, as well as extending that illegal bribe or call or abuse of power, I guess you could say, to China, and saying that the Chinese government should also look into a private American citizen that is running against him. Those were crimes. Those are crimes. It's not. It's asking for something, like asking for an official act of personal benefit. He's using his position as president to call on another government to do investigations that will benefit not American national interest or American economic interest or American security interests, but it will benefit him personally. So those are crimes. That's just done. And Congress probably could have done 2 impeachment articles on that. But wisely, they have decided to investigate the circumstances around it. And I'm listening to a lot of attorneys these days, a lot of prosecutors and defense attorneys. And what I've learned in that process is that as a prosecutor, you don't just want to know about the crime itself. You want to also, once the crime happens, you then have to establish factually, ideally, the facts of what happened when the crime was committed, but also what were the facts of leading up to the crime and what happened after the crime was committed. And when we think about it like that, we can start to see that in the course of these investigations, both of those 2 other time points are being filled out. Importantly, we've gotten a lot more information as a result of the impeachment inquiry as to how many people were involved with this shadow foreign policy to extort, to bribe the Ukrainians. We learn about the reaction of the official State Department employees. And we learn about all the little, the side deals that were going on. Giuliani and Lev and Igor and that whole situation and what they were doing. And also Rick Perry's involvement in making recommendations as to buddies of his that the Ukrainians should put on their natural gas boards to clean up corruption. And we're also finding out that there is so much more evidence of Trump being such an idiot. So, obviously we've got people who were talking with Sondland, who was operating on the instructions of the president and relating what the president's priorities were and what he wanted conditioned on official acts. Then there's also the issue of the fact that as a consequence of having these public hearings, people are coming forward more to testify. And we had this week, I guess Friday, when the Republicans went out and said there's no firsthand information that the president actually said this to Sondland. All of this is secondhand. It's possible. I think this was what the argument they were trying to construct, that Sondland, Perry, Mick Mulvaney, and Rudy Giuliani somehow organized this on their own without knowledge of the president, and were carrying this out, maybe to make him happy. Maybe that's where they were going. But testimony that was released, because there wasn't anything sensitive about it, from Friday, it's not Tim Morrison, it's somebody else. Sorry, I'm going to have to look at the thread. There's too many people talking to keep them all straight. But, yeah, Mike Sandy. Wait, no, he was the OMB guy. Sorry, there's too many. No, there's so many people testifying about the leaks thing. I'll have to find it. But I want to say it was Kelly from State Department was sitting with Sondland when he took a phone call. He called the president from a cell phone in a restaurant. You guys have probably heard this many times now. Called the president from a cell phone in a restaurant so loud that he had to hold the phone. Trump was so loud that Sondland had to hold the phone away from his ear. And everyone at the table could hear what the president was saying. And this eyewitness who overheard the president himself talking to Sondland was asking about the investigations. And the only investigation Trump cares about are the Biden investigations. And then, in an act of extreme, you can just tell that Sondland was a political appointee and not a trained career official, because after the phone call, this witness related that he asked something about President Trump caring about the situation in Ukraine, and Sondland saying Trump really only cares about big things. And the staffer said, well, there's a lot of big things going on in Ukraine, like a hot war with Russia. And Sondland replied, no, he's worried about big things like Biden, things that relate to him. Right, so now, independent of what Sondland testifies to next week, not only do we have that person's testimony, but they said there were other people at the table who could corroborate that information, that it was the president, that they overheard the president's voice that was quite distinct and quite loud saying the word investigations. And when you have 4 people who say, I sat on a table with that guy and he took a phone call from Trump and I heard this and this is what Trump said, and they all agree, and they're all testifying under oath, and they're all without, they're national employee, they're civil servants, they're not there for a political agenda. The idea they're all going to conspire in order to do this is pretty ridiculous, whereas it's pretty easy to believe that Trump would conspire or get people to lie because he does obstruction of justice all the time. So that happened on Friday. And again, so my point being that when the investigators, if you consider Congress sort of like the prosecutor, you consider Adam Schiff a prosecutor who is currently putting together his case through grand jury testimony in order to present official charges. It's been incredibly fast-paced, but incredibly valuable to do this impeachment background work, because I had no idea Trump would be this stupid. I really had no idea he would be so open and brazen and hire such incompetent people who had no ability to keep their mouths shut. And it almost worked. And this almost worked as well. So I am personally hoping that the impeachment articles will be done by the end of the year. By, Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, winter solstice, holiday time. I'm very hopeful they'll get done then, or maybe now the week after New Year's. Because when I initially was assessing the timetable for this, I had no idea how incompetent they were going to be and how many more witnesses would be able to come forward and give testimony. I kind of thought that they would pretty much just, focus on the call because that was the most obvious thing, and then some obstruction of justice charges with all of the blocking of the witnesses. But what's really good about this, in my opinion, is that the more credible, nonpartisan, sort of double verified, independently verified observations, pieces of evidence that we have, the harder it's going to be for Senate Republicans to say, look, he might have put the national security at risk, but I don't think that's a impeachable offense. Trump might have explicitly used taxpayer-funded military aid in order to bribe his way into political campaign information, but I don't think that's an impeachable offense. Trump intimidated, sent out and smeared Marie Yovanovitch while she was testifying against him in order to intimidate her and other witnesses from telling the truth, to punish her and intimidate other people. But I don't think that's an impeachable offense. I didn't realize the case against Trump could be this strong. And the more time had, and the more information that Congress has been collecting, and they collected information yesterday. We're not even talking about the OMB, guys. We're just talking about what happened on Friday after the Yovanovitch testimony. This independent witness on the call happened after the Yovanovitch testimony, and then they collected more testimony on Saturday. So don't tell me that, Dems aren't doing their jobs or Dems aren't organized. This case in particular shows that they can organize a drunken brawl in a brewery, or at least the drunken part of it. And it's becoming more difficult for the Republicans to hold on to any of their defenses, because now we have an eyewitness to a phone call. This week on Tuesday, Vindman is testifying. He was on the July 25th call. He was on a call before that he said raised concerns. And Vindman was the one who saw that the official transcript had left out important context and information related to the name Biden, CrowdStrike, and other potentially, incriminating things that happened during the phone call. He was on the call. He saw that they were deleted, and his job was to make suggestions for edits to that official transcript that maybe other people left, because everyone sort of takes their own notes on these calls, and from their perspective, what are they focused on? What are they listening to? What do they know deeply to understand in terms of the international relations dynamic going on there? And when he tried to submit his edits in order to put back in mentions of the Bidens and CrowdStrike, he was stymied, because and there was nothing classified on that call, and other calls like that go on an unclassified lower, server that's secure, but it's not a highly classified server. But this particular transcript was hidden on a code word sensitive, I think is a term they're using, server, which was like the highest security, despite it not having any classified information in it. What does that mean? That means that they had a consciousness of guilt. They knew that there was something improper, illegal about what happened on that call, and in order to hide it, they abused power again by putting it on a server that it was not meant to be on, for the purposes of keeping it under wraps. And again, consciousness of guilt. So we have a first-hand witness to the call, and Vindman, he's not the whistleblower. He didn't just go to the press. He reported it up the chain of command as he was supposed to. And he actually reported his concerns about Trump and the Ukraine, to my memory, twice. And if the White House would cooperate and turn over the records of his filing those reports, I'm sure we would find that those are corroborated. So I know everyone's like, oh, Sondland's on Wednesday. Sondland very well could take the fifth. He could plead the fifth for most of that, because he has been just exposed as a liar, left, right, and center, and he is definitely susceptible to perjury charges right now, according to at least one member of Congress, possibly more. So the Sondland testimony will be interesting, but for me, it's only going to be interesting insofar as other people, it's Sondland versus everybody else. And he's already revised his comments once to move himself closer to testimony that was given after he testified. And this is why it was so smart to do the testimony in closed sessions apart from each other, where witnesses couldn't check each other's information, because Sondland came up earlier in that testimony and he left out things like being on that call, and he left out other conversations, and he left out lots of things from his testimony, or said things that people would later contradict. And then all of these credible public servants came out, and he's like, oh, I forgot about that phone call. Let me refresh my comments. We're going to see if his memory was refreshed again about this specific phone call at a restaurant, shouting, like the president shouting in his ear. And we'll see if Sondland, in this case, again, revises his comments. I think there's every possibility to, and again, I'm not an attorney myself, but given that he's already revised his comments once, and other people are coming forward to give him information he might not know how to or want to answer, again, I'm just going to put it out there that there might be every possibility that on some answers, Sondland might take the fifth against self-incrimination in order to negotiate with Congress protection against things like being charged for perjury and misuse of his official office or things like that. So I'm less confident that will be a really juicy, exciting, revelatory couple of hours with Sondland. It will be also interesting on the Sondland one, the Sondland testimony, to see how the Republicans handle him, because until he realized that he was putting his neck out for Trump and decided, I'm not going to go to jail for this guy. I'm going to revise my comments. I've seen Michael Cohen. I've seen Roger Stone. I need to cover my butt. And that is exactly what I would advise Mr. Sondland. Cover your own butt. Donald Trump will not be loyal to you. He will throw you under the bus like he's thrown everybody else under the bus. And if you don't learn your lesson, you get what you deserve, because this man has no loyalty. So please just confess everything. Sondland, please, Ambassador Sondland, please confess. Confess. If you guys... a little bit of Hamilton there. So that's my take on the Sondland testimony, and that's also why I'm more interested in Vindman, because Vindman has nothing to cover up. Vindman has nothing to hide. Vindman can name drop. Vindman can give corroborating testimony of other people who saw Sondland happen, or what Sondland said, what happened on the call. And he is the first person I think that we will have talked to, that Congress will have talked to, that would have been on the call. And I think I'm personally most interested in that. Right. So I'm going to just check here on the chat, get some interactions, because I see you guys have comments. Also, I would really like to be able to turn my, the yada yada, the thingy-bob, the size up. This is kind of a small font. So let me move this over. I'm going to swap these over. My glasses are dirty. I can't see through them, so let me get my thing closer. All right. I'm going to read something and then I'll respond while I'm cleaning my glasses to keep any dead air from going on. The trial in the Senate will show how far the Republicans have sunk. I agree. And I guess, thank you for that, Mithril, for reminding me. So what I'm shocked at and enjoying on so many levels of Schadenfreude is that with this just almost waterfall flood of independent pieces of information, there is so much good evidence for several different articles of impeachment and subsections. Now, I have, hands up, has anyone actually read the impeachment documents from Nixon? Maybe I will do that. Maybe on a night I will just read aloud from the 1970s the articles of impeachment against Nixon. I think we could look at the ones against Clinton, but the parallels here are much, much stronger with Nixon in terms of the kinds of crimes that are being alleged or misdeeds that are being alleged. And then I will know, because I'm not sure when they vote on articles of impeachment, let's say, like in a charging document, my reference is going to be the criminal justice system, because we don't have many impeachments. Although it is, can I just say a little factoid about me? I'm going to date myself here, not as in romantically, but as in chronologically, that I was born the year before Nixon was impeached, and I was around and alive and in college for the Clinton impeachment, and now in my 40s, I am around for the Trump impeachment. So in all of American history, we've had 4 impeachment proceedings against presidents, and I have been alive for 3 of them. I am not old enough to remember the Andrew Jackson impeachment trial, but yeah. So the Senate, if they have did the president commit obstruction of Congress, let's say, as an article of impeachment, is it an all or nothing thing, or is it like under the obstruction of Congress articles of impeachment? Subsection A prevented Mick Mulvaney and this named individuals of the White House staff from testifying. B, engaged in this sort of threatening, or refused to give Congress documents from the State Department. C, refused to give comments or documents from OMB. In other words, when they vote on these charges, is it a case-by-case basis? Like, is it, I can vote guilty on obstruction of Congress for refusing to turn over State Department notes of employees who were subpoenaed by Congress, but I'm not going to vote for the charge against, White House staff because there might be executive privilege issues there. And I don't know that I will have to look into a little bit more. If people in the chat know, please do let me know. But maybe if I can do an evening or an afternoon show where we dig out the impeachment charges as written against Nixon, then we'll all know going forward what it might look like for Trump. So, the trial in the Senate, I think, is increasingly getting more difficult for the Republicans to excuse because there's just such good evidence that he engaged in bribery and extortion. And I also learned in the last 12 hours that last week the Democrats did focus groups with voters and discussed the language around impeachment. And there's things that you think and you guess, and then there are ways, but then you can actually get data, and then you know. Voters found the language of presidential bribery most persuasive. After that, they found the term extortion second most persuasive, and they found the idea of a quid pro quo is the least persuasive. And this, I just want to point out, the Democrats are switching their language from quid pro quo. And it was actually the media who was reporting on the WhatsApp exchanges where Sondland tells Volker, I think it was, the president said in no case that there's a quid pro quo. And so it's this idea that somehow Democrats have to backtrack themselves and reframe their language because they made a mistake to say quid pro quo, is the media shifting blame from itself because they were the ones again and again and again saying quid pro quo. But also, and there's a legal point on this that was made, that is, by moving from a language like quid pro quo into a word like bribery, in some ways it's not a bad tactic at this point in the investigation to start framing it as an article of impeachment. So in other words, if they would have said bribery early on, you could have said, oh, you're already determining what happened, before all the evidence is gathered. Although we have a confession. We know he's guilty. But I think at this point it is useful to change the language because bribery is mentioned as one of the two specific crimes that you could commit to be an impeachable offense. Bribery and treason. Those were the two things the founding fathers, racist, white supremacists though they were, realized were at the heart of a corruption of an executive. An executive who was hired to not engage in the national interest. It might be a foreign power interest. It might be his own interest. But that is, you want to say treason is very narrowly defined and yada, yada, yada. I think there's a spirit of treason where you're using U.S. policy to not further U.S. national interests. I think that in the executive is a form of treason, although they won't bring up articles of impeachment on that because that would be a bridge too far. But bribery, they've got him on. Bribery, they have him on. Even the Republicans won't try to defend the idea that Trump didn't offer taxpayer-funded, congressionally authorized, and cleared for corruption concerns by the Defense Department and the State Department, I think, that aid to go to Ukraine in exchange for dirt on his political opponent. And there's just no denying that. There's no denying that. Right, so I was thinking today, I don't want the show to go 2 hours. I'm just going to keep it really brief and fast, and then I get going, and I'm going to get 2 hours. So I say, 250 says, the other day Andrew Torres suggested the Republicans might start arguing Trump is too inept to know what he was doing is wrong. They've already tried. That also doesn't work insofar as, he didn't mean to do it or he didn't realize it. It's still a crime. And it's going to be so difficult, I think, for them to vote against specific charges with this amount of evidence. Because the Democrats are going to be able to say, are we a country of the rule of law, or are we a country of a cult personality? And if we are a country of the rule of laws, then no one, especially the president, should be above the law. Because then we're as corrupt as what the Ukrainians were trying to move away from. And I think if they put Trump before the Constitution, they are domestic enemies of our constitutional rule of law. They're basically saying when our party's in power, the rules don't apply. The laws, we will find ways around the law. And we will make sure that people aren't held accountable for the crimes they commit if they're white men we like. I don't know how you survive. I don't know how we survive as a republic when a president can get away with using taxpayer-funded money to align our national policies with Russian interests against our own national interests, and for Republicans to say that that's not a problem. We're no longer a republic at that point. We're just not. I need to find Hamilton bootleg. Oh, yeah, actually, I've got some. I can help you with that. Well, I've got a Hamilton bootleg of, I think, I shouldn't say this out loud, but on my Dropbox. Don't tell anybody. But that's the show, not the musical. But I think you can still find some Hamilton music on YouTube, occasionally. Now, to be fair, I have premium because I don't deal with ads, because of my shows and everything else. But I think if you go on YouTube, there are still some Hamilton bits. Yeah, look at that! Look at here! Don't tell anyone because they might take it down, but you can go find it. Okay, so there you go. Look for Quali Dad. It's still up. We can't... don't put any sound on because that would be copyright strike, but there you go. You're welcome. Now, again, maybe that was because I have premium, but that didn't look like the Hamilton official channel. I always like to help people enjoy Hamilton because it is historic. It is musical art history. Anything else? Laura Ingraham. Oh, God. Don't even get me started on this right-wing fash. Okay, so, all right. So, then, all right, so trying to remember what I've covered so far. We also had testimony from somebody from the Office of Management and Budget. All right, yeah, dang it, yeah, that was Sandy, Mark Sandy. I have to figure out who the guy was from Ukraine. Those will probably also be somewhere here in the Washington Post. But yeah, so if I said Mark Sandy earlier testified about the meeting in Ukraine, that's wrong. There's too many witnesses coming forward to keep them all straight. They're like, I know something about this president. And please get on record. A long time, so from the Washington Post, White House budget official says decision to delay aid to Ukraine was highly irregular. Yeah. No poop, Sherlock. A longtime budget official testified Saturday. Congress is working on a Saturday for you guys. Trying to get those impeachment charges in time for Christmas. It's beginning to look a lot like impeachment everywhere Trump goes. A longtime budget official testified Saturday that the White House decision to freeze military aid to Ukraine in mid-July was highly irregular. That's diplomatic speak for we don't do this. And that senior political appointees in the Office of Management and Budget were unable to provide an explanation for the delay because it was a criminal act. Sorry, I'm editorializing. The Washington Post didn't write that part. The testimony from Mark Sandy, the first employee of OMB to testify in the House impeachment probe, appeared to confirm Democratic assertions, because, facts, that the decision to withhold nearly $400 million in congressionally approved funds for Ukraine, including millions in lethal aid, was a political one. Sandy, the Deputy Associate Director for National Security Programs at OMB. Oh, I love that. This is the thing you gotta love about DC, and that is the length of titles. You gotta love the length of these people's titles, right? So imagine that you had a business card and it read Mark Sandy, and then underneath it was like the Deputy Associate Director for National Security Programs at Office of Management and Budget. Like this long. Testified that he was instructed to sign the first of several apportionment letters in which budget officials formally instituted the freeze on the funds, according to two people familiar with the testimony, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to speak frankly. He was never given a specific reason as to why the letter was being sent out, the people added. I just want to say, I hope that one of these people who spoke on the condition of anonymity was, like, the witness. Like, I hope they're like, yeah, this is what my public testimony is going to be. Because, well, like, why not? But otherwise, it's obviously members of Congress or their staffs. But all this is going to come out in the transcripts anyway, so who cares? I'm actually also, one idea I had for the happy hour, if I didn't bounce this off Kevin, but I should have, was for us to do a dramatic reenactment of when the skiff was charged by Dupa Republican. I'll just call him Dupa. It's Polish for butt. Dupa had, what's his name? Where Adam Schiff's like, you're gonna remove yourself. I love a little bit of Adam Schiff shade. Okay. Other witnesses have testified that the letter Sandy signed was dated 25 July, the same day that President Trump spoke by phone with Ukrainian President Volodymyr, is that how you say that? Zelensky, and 1 week after OMB verbally informed interagency officials that they were withholding the funds on orders from the White House. The signature of Sandy's boss, political appointee Michael Duffy, appears on subsequent letters. Sandy testified that the change came about when Duffy told him he wanted to learn more about the budget apportionment process. Sandy thought this was odd, the people familiar with his testimony said, and he told investigators that he suggested to Duffy that if he wanted to learn more about the process, there were other ways to do it, but Duffy insisted. Sandy testified that he had never in his career seen a senior political OMB official assume control of a portfolio in such a fashion, according to people familiar with the testimony, who added that he did not raise a fuss because he wanted to keep his job. And this is why we have whistleblower laws. And this is why we don't expose the whistleblower's name to the president and members of Congress who are looking to destroy their reputations for having the temerity to speak out against corruption. His testimony does not appear to shed any new light on whether the Trump administration's decision to hold Ukraine was leveraged to pressure that country's government, but it undermines the acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney's public assertion that Ukraine aid was frozen in a routine manner that happened all the time. Liar! Liar! You guys remember from Princess Bride? I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. But after what you just said, I'm not even sure I want to be that anymore. I love The Princess Bride. I watch that movie a lot. So that happened yesterday on Sunday. And then there's another... like, this just all happened since the Yovanovitch testimony, people. This is how fast the news is coming at us. All right. Former White House national security official told House investigators that Gordon Sondland, ambassador to the EU, was acting at President Trump's behest and spoke to a top Ukrainian official about exchanging military aid for political investigations, two elements at the heart of the impeachment inquiry. This was it. Is this the guy who was in... All right, so Tim Morrison, the top Russia and Europe advisor on the National Security Council, testified that between the 16th of July and September 11th, he understood that Sondland had spoken to Trump about half a dozen times. Oh, yeah, this is a whole new guy. This isn't the guy in Ukraine. This is apparently somebody else. According to transcripts of his sworn October 31st deposition that was released by the House committees on Saturday. We got new testimony. That's who this person is. I'm learning it. I'm trying to keep up with this stuff in real time too, people. So come along with me. Trump has said he does not know Sondland well. Of course he has. And has tried to distance himself from the EU ambassador, whom Trump put in charge of Ukraine policy along with 2 others, even though Ukraine is not part of the EU. Sondland continues to emerge as possibly the key figure in the Democrats' impeachment inquiries. Multiple witnesses had now described him as central to answering questions at the heart of the effort to remove Trump from office. Did the president specifically withhold military aid in a White House visit desperately sought by the new Ukrainian government in the face of Russian aggression in exchange for investigations into his political rivals and a White House meeting? They keep forgetting the White House meeting. I know they want to always link it to the aid because that's the most explosive, but he was also using the White House and leveraging a White House meeting, which is also an official public act. So that does tend to get left out, and it really shouldn't, because it's as much a crime to use his White House appearance and visit to leverage political dirt as anything else. The release of the Morrison transcript came as a longtime budget official gave sworn testimony behind closed doors Saturday that the White House decision to freeze military aid to Ukraine in mid-July was highly irregular, and senior political appointees in the Office of Management and Budget were unable to provide an explanation for the delay. It is not looking good. Literally, there are fingerprints. It's like a crime scene. It's like a crime happened, and then the conspirators or the people who committed the crime left their fingerprints at the scene, and then they left it in the getaway car, and then they left it on the weapons, and then they left it on their plans to do the crime in the first place. And we have to go through and find all these fingerprints. I say we, Congress. But oh my gosh, Trump is so screwed. He's so screwed. And then perhaps another sign of this, we had an election at the weekend. Might as well cover this as well now that we're here, because this is in my bookmarks to cover. But it's a Washington Post article, so we're already here. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards was elected to a second term on Saturday, overcoming opposition from President Trump and an increasingly polarized state electorate to hand Democrats their second major victory in a governor's race over the past 2 weeks. I am stunned at the ability of Democrats to get elected in southern states. I mean, it was Tony Evers in Wisconsin barely squeaked out against Scott Walker, a few thousand votes, I think. And that was in a midterm election, which had higher voter turnout than most midterms in a while. And here, you've got a place that doesn't, it's got a history of voting for Dixiecrats, but I don't understand the local politics, and I don't understand of Louisiana's state elections, how much of this was really an internal referendum. For instance, if I can do a comparison, Matt Bevin in Kentucky lost his governorship, but of the 5 statewide races, the other 4 were picked up or held by Republicans. And Matt Bevin apparently was kind of a jerk and ticked off a lot of people, not only on the Democratic side, but also people on the Republican side didn't like him very much. So even though Trump campaigned for Bevin, that wasn't able to counter the fact that people locally didn't like him very much. And I don't know the local politics here in Louisiana, how much of this is, can be nationalized, how much of this is really about local politics and the candidates that people had to choose from. But it is still a Democrat in a governor's seat when we've got redistricting coming up in 2020. So that is huge to protect democracy. It's incredibly huge. It's someone who can put up roadblocks to Republican voter suppression and gerrymandering. And that's precisely what we need if we want to maintain the integrity of maintain the integrity of elections. Like there was some perfect time in the white supremacist American past when white people just gave everybody who wasn't white as much access and resources to vote. We've never had that, right? There has been a problem with white supremacists and voter suppression since the franchise was expanded beyond white people. They have considered non-white voters and people who ally with non-white voters the threat. So let's just put that in there. But when it comes to countering that, having Democrats in governors, Well, obviously the legislature is the ideal one because they draw it, but at least if you have a governor, they have to negotiate, so that's good. And there's some Iowa. I don't really even know kind of like what Iowa is anymore at this point. It's just I don't know if it's going to be as decisive a state as it was in the past because they're carving up the top 4 candidates are just carving up the percentages to the point where you don't. I think it's gonna be hard to see someone having momentum coming out of Iowa if they basically tie or only just squeak it out. So a new pair. Let's just read this out again from the Washington Post. And it's still early days. We're not into January. You also have people who get hot for a while and then they drop off. So that happened with Harris. That happened with Warren. It could also happen with Buttigieg, so we'll have to see. And I don't want to upset any Buttigieg fans in the audience, but I just can't take a guy who is a mayor of South Bend seriously as a president. He just has, running a city of less than 250,000 people is not the same as being president. And my personal opinion is, if you haven't run and won a statewide office in your own state yet, you shouldn't run for president. He might be it's good to set yourself up for the future. Lots of people have to run for president a couple times before they become the nominee. And there is no shame in running for the nomination and losing and trying again. There is a shame, I have to say, of trying to run for the same office that you didn't win the last time, a second time. It's why I would completely oppose a Clinton. Well, she's not really running. But even if she was raising money and hiring staff, those are the only 2 things that convince me somebody is actually running. If you're not raising money, Michael Bloomberg obviously being an exception, but if you're not raising money from supporters and you're not hiring staff, you're not running for office. So I don't even pay attention to that crap until they start hiring people and raising money. But but it's just I can't take. I don't think you're field tested. I don't think you're road tested in that case. And yeah, it might be that you speak very well and you really move people emotionally, but so did Trump, and he's not a good executive. So I want someone who has proven track record of winning the voters over in their own home state first as a prerequisite for me supporting them. Like I said, maybe he'll run for governor of his home state and win that. Maybe he'll run for the U.S. Senate, in which case I will look at him again. But me, personally, he doesn't meet the experience criteria that I would put on having a president. But, I'm not in Iowa. So let's see what people in Iowa think. A new poll of Iowa voters released Saturday night suggests a disruption in the Democratic primary contest in the first voting state, with South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg surging to the front of the crowded pack. Although we say surging to the front, it's going to be within the margin of error. The survey showed Buttigieg with support from 25% of likely caucus goers, followed by essentially a 3-way tie for second place. I'm going to see the margin of error to see if he's outside of the margin of error in a second. Followed by essentially a 3-way tie for second place between Senators Warren and Sanders and former Vice President Joe Biden, who all have about 15% support. None of the other candidates are in the double digits. The poll differs from other recent Iowa polls, which showed Buttigieg, Biden, and Warren and Sanders knotted closely together. The survey released by CNN, the Des Moines Register, and Mediacom was of 500 likely Democratic caucus goers and has a margin of error of 4.4%. So then he is outside of the margin of error. If this 4.4% margin of error refers to this 25% of likely caucus goers, and then these guys are about 10% underneath, then he is well outside of the margin of error. I also think that it's a little bit of a flirtation with the hot new thing, and he will have to do more to sustain that over the Christmas holiday and moving into January. But there's been a lot of churning. Quite a lot of fluidity. You can see that in terms of, I would say, the Democratic base, first, don't listen to, sorry, people who are on left Twitter, but don't listen to left Twitter because left Twitter is not like Iowa voters. It's not representative of where the Democratic voters are. What we see is that I actually think there's quite a lot of general satisfaction with the candidates to the point where, all right, we all know that, let's be honest, like Biden is got name recognition, he's got a sort of a base there, and he would be better than Trump. But, Biden does not brought the kind of candidate strength that Clinton brought, which is a little bit unfair because she was only running against like 2 or 3 other people, and he's running against 15. On the other hand, he's the vice president, and he should be a natural leader, and he should be, you would think, in an ideal world, able to capitalize on prior support while also providing a vision for the future. And the other thing that I don't see Biden doing, he completely failed, is better messaging on this Trump scandal. I mean, maybe one could say it would be a bad thing for him to try to make hay out of this, to try to benefit from this impeachment inquiry. On the other hand, he is not making the argument, which I think he could have been making from the start, that, look, Trump fears me more than anyone else. He fears me so much, he actually violated the law in order to try to beat me. And if you want to give Trump the person that he thinks is the most powerful or the most likely to beat him, then you got to get behind me, because he's already admitted that I scare him more than any other candidate. Now, I'm not saying that you have to agree with that. Right? I'm talking about what Biden's messaging should be. Because it would make a lot more sense to do that and argue, tap into the Democratic voter base that they want an alternative to Trump, that they want somebody who can beat Trump. And if Biden was talking about this in a way, instead of opposed to saying, shut up and show your taxes and just on all this sort of OAP, demeasuring that he wants to engage with, frame it in terms of give Trump the candidate he fears the most. Give Trump the candidate who he broke the law to try to avoid meeting, broke the law to try to smear with false accusations. Vote for me. But Biden, I said this months ago when he got in. Biden is a terrible candidate. He flubs his words. He's got a lot of problems. He's, of course, still better than Trump. But I'm personally really shocked at how weak his candidacy has been. I think he's been lazy. I think he's been taking things for granted. I think he's not put in the effort. I think he doesn't understand where the Democratic Party is. And he makes dumb statements like, oh, once Trump is gone, the fever is going to break and the Republicans are going to come back to being what they were. Like what, polite white supremacists instead of out white supremacists? How out of touch are you with these people are covering up a conspiracy? They're defending a conspiracy against our U.S. national interests, and you want to work with them? So anyway, I see a path for Biden because of the strengths he has, but I don't think he's the best choice. I also am not going to say who I'm voting for anymore. I'll give my opinion on candidates, but I will never again, from this point forward, tell anybody who I'm voting for in a Democratic primary, because it's not worth it. Left Twitter is just not worth having an opinion, because all you're going to do is get crap. And I'm not going to submit myself to the judgment of strangers and the contempt of strangers for engaging in my vote. So read between the lines, everyone who criticized me. I'm just going to give my opinion, but I'm never going to tell you who I'm voting for again. All right, is that everything? Is that everything I've done? Oh, no. Let's talk about this first, and then we'll take a little break, because I need to warm up my coffee, and we've been going for an hour. That sounds about right. All right, can we just talk about what a threat Bill Barr is to our Constitution? He is, we want to talk again about domestic enemies. Bill Barr is actually an active domestic enemy of the laws and the rule of law in the United States. And let me explain why. He is trying to get a theocracy. We have men, white men, in executive positions of government who don't actually believe in the Constitution. What they believe in is white men with Christian worldviews imposing that worldview on everybody who is everyone, whether or not they agree with it or not only to impose it in sort of like a social shaming way, but to actually use the power and levers of government to impose their white supremacist, anti-democratic sort of worldview of what America should be, that goes against the Constitution. So let's have a look at this. And this is from lawandcrime.com. Attorney General Bill Barr launched into an emotional tirade against the left at an annual meeting of the Conservative Federalist Society on Friday evening. By the way, this is the same Federalist Society that had the rape protector, the sexual assault cover-upper, Brett Kavanaugh, at the same event, I think, or at least the same group. Now, lawyers and legal commentators are intensifying calls for Barr's impeachment. Barr's eyebrow-raising speech was widely panned after a video of the following portion made the rounds on social media. Should we just play it here? I think we can. I have no idea how the volume is, so let's see how that's going to go. Although you guys can't hear that because I don't have the desktop audio on. All right, we're going to try this again. 53 seconds long. Let's just hear the complete lunacy of a man who is violating his oath to the Constitution, and I agree, should be impeached.
Unfortunately, just in the past few years, we have seen these conflicts take on an entirely new character. Immediately after President Trump won election, opponents inaugurated what they called the resistance. And they rallied around an explicit strategy of using every tool and maneuver to sabotage the functioning of the executive branch and his administration.
All right, let's talk about what that was. What has the resistance, which I consider myself a member of, self-identify as #resist, what have they done? They've had peaceful public protests, and they filed lawsuits. Can you think of anything else the resistance has done to challenge Trump? They committed any acts of violence? No. Have they, thrown blood on Trump or tried to, in some way, damage his security? No. They're using the legal recourses that are open to them in order to challenge what they view as unconstitutional executive policy. Just as a frame of reference, right?
The fact of the matter is that in waging a scorched earth, no-holds-barred war of resistance against this administration, it is the left that is engaged in the systematic shredding of norms and undermining the rule of law.
This is such typical fascist tactics, which is to accuse your opponents of the things you're doing falsely accuse your opponents of the things you're doing so that the people in the populace just see there's no difference between the parties. And when they assume the Democrats will say someone is credulous enough to believe this and think that Democrats and Republicans are the same. What the Republicans are doing on the House Impeachment Committee is the absolute same as what the Democrats are doing. What Barr is doing is destroying the integrity of our constitutional process. Because what the Democrats are doing is not the same. They are operating in the House under the rules that were written by the Republicans for the Clinton hearings, impeachment hearings. And they are going through the same collecting private testimony and then releasing it in public and then putting out the public testimony to allow the Republicans to have their time to question witnesses. But instead of questioning witnesses, they engage in public what's the word I'm looking for here? Spectacle. Distraction, circus, procedural objections. Nothing to do with the substance because they can't win on the facts. And this is why it's so dangerous when you have people who don't adhere to the laws, who don't adhere to our norms in these positions of power, because they degrade them and then blame the left for what they're doing. These people are dangers, they're threats to our liberty, our rule of law, or the way the Constitution is meant in an ideal form to work. And I personally, there's a lot of problems with our Constitution, a lot of things that we still need to fix. But I don't want to give power over to these guys. This guy, where is he? Here? No, this side. I'm not giving power to decide what is and isn't constitutional to a man who has been proven to be willing to ignore crimes to cover up for his boss. A man who says, I don't really care about what history thinks about me. Oh, that was it. Okay. So yeah, William Barr, he also went over to several countries. The UK, in The Guardian, they reported there was a British security official who said that they'd never seen anything like it. William Barr was basically asking Britain to do a hatchet job on the American intelligence services. That's your modern Republican Party, people. Did I cover everything? I think I did. It was just 4 tweets, but it took us a long time. I'm going to be honest, guys. I know that we're supposed to go like an extra hour, but I'm kind of tired this week. I'm kind of tired because I already worked for 2.5 hours before I did this show. I did an editing on a video that I need to get done by the 27th. So what I'll do is an hour and 15 minutes. You guys gonna, is it okay if we don't do if we don't do a PU video this time? What I can do, how about this? How about I go and warm up my coffee? Because I have my Der Kirche Tag coffee mug here, which tells you about what happens in a day in Cologne. And the first thing is aufstehen. I'm going to do this and then I'll tell you. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and warm up my coffee. I'll come back and I'll talk to the chat. So if you guys have questions for me, we can do like an extra 15 minutes. But I just don't have the energy at this point, after doing all that, to sit through a PragerU video on top of defending the Constitution from people like Wilbur. Natalie Kirk, it's my show. Thank you. I know, but I feel like it's not my show. I feel like I work for you guys. All right, so the Kirche Tag, the Cologne Day. Zuerst, first, aufstehen. That means you get up. Gucken, ob der Dom noch steht. Look to see if the cathedral is still standing. That's the second thing you do. Then Wäckchen frühstücken, which is you may have like a certain kind of Cologne breakfast after you check to make sure the cathedral is still standing. Then bisschen arbeiten, a little work. Bisschen Pause, a little break. Bisschen arbeiten, a little more work. And then half-han essen, that's a local half-han, sounds like half a chicken, but it's really just a loaf of bread and cheese. Kirsch trinken, local beer drink. Noch ein Kirsch trinken, drink another beer. Für den FC betten, for the local team. Betten is not bet, that's wetten, but anyway. And then schlafen, then go to sleep. So I'm going to go and warm up my coffee. You guys come up with questions or comments, things that you want me to read out. If you can, please tag me or at least write my name in all caps, because I know sometimes you guys have a back and forth, and I don't want to miss something that's meant for me, but I also don't want to read out like half of your back and forth because it's without context, and if I try to jump in your conversation, I might assume it's about me when it's not. So yeah, let's take 5. I don't really need that much time to warm up my coffee, and I will come right back. So we're going to swap over, and you guys get your questions ready, and I'll see you on the flip side. I have to turn up the music now.
Sunshine, baby.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the chat and I ain't seeing any questions. Ah, dang it. I already addressed the transphobic comments in the chat to you, Phantom, on Friday. I said that they were wrong comments. So there you go. I don't know what you mean by pandering, because I don't know who you think she's pandering to. But in terms of the transphobic, I think that they were like the softest sort of transphobia of sort of like, you know, I'm not saying that's excusing it, but when I've, I'm hoping basically that there is room for her to grow on that issue. But obviously very disappointing. Why do all these surveys keep producing wildly different results? Well, I can tell, I mean, it depends on what you think is wildly different. Personally, if a margin of error is plus or minus 4.4%, that is almost a 10% range that something could be in. Let's just round it up to 5% or round it down to 4%. Someone is at 20% with plus or minus 4. That is saying, let me just translate this from statistical speak into real speak. What it's saying is that we sampled this population, but based on the number of people that participated, the real number in that population of 20% could be as high as 24 in reality, if we had a perfect sample, or as low as 16. But we're going to we put it in the middle and we say it's 20. That's so you can know what the full range is. You're not going to put it at 22 and then say plus 2 minus 6. That doesn't make any sense to people. So with a margin of error of 4.4%, it's a 10% shift. And that means that a survey that puts Buttigieg at 16% and another one that puts him at 24% are actually still within the margin of error of that 20% finding. So what I would say is don't focus so much on the point estimates. Always keep in mind the margin of error, the error bars around that point estimate, and to see whether or not any differences between the positions in time or the candidates or whatever is within or outside of the margin of error. And the closer it is to being within the margin of error, the less real difference there is. So when you talk about wildly different results, a poll difference of 2 or 3 points is actually not wildly different. That's very much, depending on the size of the sample, within the margin of error of other polls. Anything else? Do I think McConnell and Graham are aware that Trump is guilty, and do they believe their own poo? I think they know he's guilty. That's why they're struggling. That's why Lindsey Graham gets so emotional and has little man tantrums on air, because he is boxed into a corner as much as Trump is. I don't know what the Russians have on him, Leningrad Lindsey, I don't know. But he is more interested in protecting Trump and the Putin agenda than he is the American people. So obviously, if they went on the facts, they'd have to admit he's guilty, and they won't. So, yes. That's what, okay. Who would win in a fight, Charlie Kirk-sized Ben Shapiro or 2 Ben Shapiro-sized Charlie Kirks? I feel like that's a Kevin question. I feel like we should totally defer that question to Kevin. I want to see 2 Ben Shapiro-sized Charlie Kirks fight. I want to see that. That's a great question, Natalie. Why do as an Australian, if I come to America on election day, can I sell democracy sausages outside polling booths? You want to export an Aussie tradition. The only thing that you can't do within so many feet of a polling station that I'm aware of is actively campaign for, or put up signs for, or in any way, do campaigning work, electioneering within 500 yards of a polling place. So and you also can't give somebody a reward or a thing of value for voting. So for instance, we wanted to encourage students to vote when I was on campus back in donkey's years, back in the last century. And we couldn't in any meaningful way say, if you voted, we will give you a voucher for a soda, which is what we wanted to do. So instead, what we said was anyone who came in with a sticker that said I voted got 1 free soda. So you take off your sticker and turn it in, that was your free drink. Now, the reason why that wasn't illegal was because in theory, anybody could just make up their own I voted sticker and walk up. You didn't have to vote in order to get the soda. But people who did go to vote and got the sticker that said I voted could also then turn that in. But it wasn't a direct exchange for voting, and it wasn't limited only to people who were voting. So as long as your democracy wieners, is that what they were called? Your democracy hot sausages were not a thing of value that was given in exchange for a vote, you would be able to do that as well. So just so you know. Weekend voting and preferential ballots. Well, certainly we need to do one thing that would definitely help the voting turnout is postal voting and early voting. Also weekend voting. And those are all the things Republicans try to restrict and make illegal to stop non-white people from voting. So you have to remember Republicans don't like democracy. And so any policy you have, there was people who got yelled at. It was teachers who got, was that in the UK though? It might have been the UK. University, or teachers criticized telling students to vote. I saw this. Yeah, this is crazy. Okay, this isn't in the US. But this just tells you like the way in which actual democracy is considered a threat to some people who pretend like they want to live in a democracy. Academics face furious backlash for encouraging students to vote, which makes about as much sense to me as a furious backlash for encouraging students to floss their teeth. How can you possibly object to students voting or to telling students to vote? It's their civic duty as citizens. So, all right. When Carrie Pacher, a professor at Nottingham Trent University, tweeted 2 weeks ago that students could register to vote at both their home and term time addresses, which is true, she didn't anticipate the tirade of anger it would unleash. She was reported to the police and the Electoral Commission, and someone wrote to her vice chancellor calling for her to be disciplined. Professor Pacher, who is director of Nottingham Center for Children, Young People and Families, posted what she thought was an innocuous tweet on Thursday evening. By Sunday, she had blocked 568 people on Twitter who were furiously accusing her of encouraging students to break the law and vote twice, which is clearly not what she said. She could said you could be registered at both places. You can't vote at both places. She insists she did no such thing and simply wanted to ensure students didn't miss out on voting in the general election because they didn't know their rights. Quote, I didn't mention tactical voting, and I didn't think I'd said anything remotely controversial. I was just reminding students of their democratic right. I was really surprised by the storm I found myself in the middle of, she said. One angry tweet to her said, quote, enticing people to commit fraud is a criminal offense that can include a prison sentence. Not very good for your career prospects. Another said, encouraging illegality and bull BSing about your motives. Do you think we're all stupid? And this is a problem when stupid people don't know the law. Right. The student vote will be crucial for this term. For the first time, universities have welcomed 3 whole years worth of students first, second, and term years who were too young to vote in the European. Let's get back to the law. Did they actually say? Universities have an explicit legal obligation to encourage students to sign up to vote as a condition of being accredited for the offices of students. Even if they haven't been directed to by their universities, academics have freedom of speech, and there is nothing unlawful about encouraging people to vote. I'm just looking to see if there's any mention here about double registration. I don't see it. But my understanding is that too. Not only that, but like Commonwealth residents can vote in British elections. They're going to freak out about that as well. So that's what you go up against when you've got people who don't want to expand the franchise. They want to narrow it and limit it. Well, in terms of who I would vote for in process of elimination, we'll have to see who's still running in the Wisconsin primaries, and then you can guess. But like I said, I'm never going to tell people again. You can guess all you want. That's interesting. I'll just go, that's an interesting guess. Vote by mail. It's harder to vote with a visual disability, but you manage. Yeah, and Donna, I hope you're saying your name right there. At least too, in those situations, with a postal vote, you can have more time. And I would hate to, if you had to travel and then there was poor lighting or there weren't the correct, the sort of physical settings that you needed to be able to read your ballot. So I do think that's it's better. It's not illegal to if the 1940s Republicans did a study to see how well they could win 1940s Republican did a study to see how they could win black voters back. They ignored it and covered it up because the results basically said do stuff to help them. It's the same thing with the Hispanic vote. I mean, in terms of the African American vote or the black vote, not everybody who is black is from Africa, so it's kind of like which term do you use? But if you just do sort of whites, blacks, Hispanic, and then there's Hispanic white and there's Hispanic non-white, but let's just take Hispanics as a collective. 2/3 of them might vote for the Democratic Party, but 1/3 or higher, 40%, were voting for the Republicans because a lot of Hispanic voters come from or have their history of Spain being a Catholic country, Portugal being a Catholic country. Those colonial powers spread Catholicism, particularly, where they took over just in a similar way that the British came over here, and the English, and not so much the Irish, but the Scots and everyone else promoted their Protestant as a culture, their Protestantism as a culture. And because of that, on social issues, Hispanic voters tend to be anti-abortion. They tend to be more conservative on issues like same-sex marriage. They tend to be, pro-death penalty, or in that way, maybe not with Catholicism, but they don't. It's not unheard of for a Republican, especially like an old school when George W. Bush was governor of Texas, actually court people with an Hispanic background, because most of when you look at people who live in Arizona and New Mexico, a lot of there's a big tradition of people who are actually Mexican, and then the United States took all the land from Mexico, and those people stayed and became Americans. So it's not like those people don't have a history and a tie to the land. So that's also something Republicans used to do. But in this case, they're not interested in winning over a wide swath of voters. They're interested in narrowing the voting population so that only the votes of white conservative, evangelical, pro-authoritarian Republicans count. And then they have a veneer of the rule of law and the veneer of the Constitution, so that they can basically tell other people, stop complaining because you live in the freest country in the world that we run for ourselves. So yes, people who are members of the Commonwealth are able to vote in Britain if they are like residents of Britain at the time of the election. I've had, in 2010, there was a Canadian student who was living in the UK for his undergraduate, and he registered and voted. And I've had a couple other people who were Commonwealth residents who were residing in the like people from the Australia. You can't like just send in a ballot. Like, Canadians can't postal vote from Canada into the elections. But unless they've changed the laws, Commonwealth residents who are Commonwealth members who are residents of the UK are allowed to vote. Anything else? Okay. Conservative friends asking me why minorities don't vote Republican. They got upset when they say they need to stop being racist. Yeah. I mean, this is it. If you ask, and I'm going to kind of do a generalization about white people here, but if you ask white people who have not had a lot of interaction with non-whites, I think what they tend to think is, well, of course, if black people should think like me. And if they just thought like me, they'd see how much sense it makes to vote Republican, instead of thinking, well, gee, what is it like to be black in America? What are the barriers and the obstacles and the problems that I would face as a black American that I don't face as a white American? And how many of those obstacles and problems and things that affect my life are the Republicans really talking about? And I think Republicans try to get around that by saying, oh, everyone cares about taxes. Everyone cares about the deficit. Everyone cares about small business. Yeah, but none of that addresses all the structural inequalities that disadvantage people getting ahead in that economy, or, of having to, they don't live in a tax bracket where they're able to evade taxes, and so they have to bear the weight of cuts based on deficits to their programs. So I could see where someone who is aspirational, who wanted to make a lot of money, who was pretty much focused on, the kind of capitalist American dream that was put out there as a way to escape or to improve their situation in life, would ally themselves with money-grubbing interests like the Republicans. Because it's not about the group or the country, it's about their personal wealth. And I think that those kinds of individuals, whether they're black or white or Hispanic, would be attracted to that party. But that doesn't mean the Republicans are actually trying to attract voters outside of that message. Whilst most black voters don't vote Republicans, do you think that sometimes Democrats get complacent about having the black vote secured in the sense they don't actually help black people? I think you have to really, I mean, okay. So first of all, you have to talk about whether or not you're talking about like Democratic policies on the state level or the federal level. You also have to look at the role of representation within the Democratic Party. So what your question seems to assume that Democrats are primarily white people who are taking black people for granted. And if you look at the way that the Democratic Party is made up, we have a lot of black men and women representing and giving voice to those concerns and actively participating in the committee process, chairing committees, drafting legislation, having an impact on the policy. So Republicans like to say that Democrats are somehow, using the old plantation or whatever else. And in their framework, of course, they look and they think about only white Democrats because they only think about white people. But I think when, Elijah Cummings, for instance, and other important members, if you look at the Squad and their background in diversity, right, we're talking about people, it's not just about white people being substantively representing black people or because they can't descriptively represent black people. I think one of the things that moves the Democratic Party forward is putting people in place who are able to articulate for themselves and their communities at the same level as the white people who are doing the same. So, if you want to say there, who then is taking the black vote for granted? I think that there is a history between the African American black community of voters and the Democratic Party. And I do think that there's more room for more representation. I do think that there's more room. So I don't want to say that the Democratic Party can't improve here. I've sort of half jokingly said in the past, black women will save us. And as half joking because it's not black women's job to save America. That is not their responsibility. On the other hand, that demographic is without a doubt the one that deserves the most respect and appreciation in the Democratic Party because they have the commitment. They have been the backbone. They have turned out more than white women, more than white people, and in that we should listen to them because of their work, not because of their identity. But on the whole, I think when you look at the Republican talking points about Democrats taking the black vote for granted, to me, that question assumes that the Democratic Party is as white as the Republican Party. And it ignores the actual diversity we have in terms of women representatives, LGBTQIA, different backgrounds. We have a much more diverse party, empowering people to represent a diverse set of needs. And so I kind of resist the framing of the question. All right, where are you guys? Move the lines and now I can't see. Oh, do you want to see your pic? Okay, here. Sorry. I was just talking to the camera and I haven't really shown you what I'm looking at. So for those of you who aren't watching the live chat live, for those of you who, I'm going to get out of studio mode here. So, oh, you want to see some holiday pictures too? Let's just, we'll minimize that because it's kind of this, I'm trying to be seasonal. I'm trying to make sure that if people watch my shows in future, they feel very dated. They have a real sense of, ooh, this was a Christmas special, wasn't it? So, except now I've moved it over and I can't see it. So I'm going to have to move it back over to this side because I'm getting old and my eyes are failing and I can't read 8-point font anymore. Oh, that didn't work out the way I wanted. That didn't go anything like I wanted. All right, I'm going to give this one more chance. Here we go. Now, Republican. See what you guys said. Skip this part of the video. Discourses Republicans' friends probably don't get the difference between institutional racism and just personally hate hating all brown people. Yeah, that's the other thing too. I mean, it's kind of like what I was getting back to in the front of the show, that when you are white, you don't see the white supremacy. And you don't see, like, again, I was starting to watch All Eyes on Me, which was a biopic about Tupac last night. And in there, it was 1970s, and there was Black liberation movements, and his mother very much of an activist in that movement. And when she talks about a racist society, an oppressive society, one in which they don't have freedom, you can say, if you're not in jail, you're free, but you're not. And I just sighed so much, like with Black liberation points at the time. And it's just, yeah, I think we tend to give white men so much of a pass that they don't earn, they haven't earned, and that they don't deserve, because they're white and because they're men. If Donald Trump was anything other than a rich white guy doing this, if he was Hispanic, if he was Black, if he was biracial or mixed race, if it was a woman on the left, if it was a gay person, all of these would be completely demonized and held up as the reason why he's so corrupt. But because he's a Protestant white guy protected by evangelicals, he's not going to get the same treatment as anyone else would get. Where should I put the fire? Should I put the fire near me? Okay, we'll put the cozy fire there. We'll move Lion Kitty as well. Wasn't supposed to go this long. You guys have interesting questions. Okay. Oh, Control Plus should increase the size. Let's have a go. Well, the thing is that mine's not Control because it's my keyboard is in German. So is that STR? And I don't know which one is a plus sign. Let's have a go here. Oh yeah, look at you go. Hey, you guys made me smarter. Control Plus. Oh, that's too big now. Can I do Control Minus to take it away? And I can. That's so awesome. Who told me that? I lost your text now because I changed the size of the font. Whoever it was, that was awesome. Thank you. Natalie, thank you for that. YouTube walkout to protest the new TOS, December 10th through 13th. Hit you up on Twitter at okay. Hold on. Let me find this. So what do you mean by, I'm curious now. I'm going to call you CDI because I'm not even going to attempt to embarrass myself with your name. But yeah, what part of the TOS are you interested in objecting to? And what do you mean by a walkout, 10th through the 13th? That's during the time of the British election, so kind of works for me because I'm going to be busy, but I'm just a little bit curious as to what in particular about the TOS you are interested in. I noticed also, I'm just going to say this, not that you guys really care, but I was asked to rate my channel as to whether or not my channel was safe for children or safe for, if I create content intended for people under the age of 16. And I was like, hell no. No, I don't. I mean, it's probably going to hurt me monetization-wise, but this channel is for grown-ups or aspiring grown-ups. And I have absolutely no problem with YouTube not offering my content to anyone under the age of 16. And so this is nothing to do with the TOS, but in terms of that kind of responsive self-classification, I was at least happy about that. Doesn't everyone who deserves to be treated with generosity white men get? Yeah, I know. I want to uplift other people, not lower white guys. This is it. Like when white people are objecting to, affirmative action and stuff. And it's like, well, you don't complain about legacies at universities. So what you're saying is that somebody who is on the cusp of qualification or as qualified as a white person, giving them the opportunity, because the white person's probably going to get into another college, they're going to land on their feet, they're going to be fine, right? That is unfair. But the policy that universities have, that if you were just, born to somebody whose mama or daddy put the seed in, graduated from our university, you're automatically accepted regardless of your merit? That's okay? Wait, how is it okay for white people to pass this educational legacy spots on from generation to generation without merit. But giving somebody who otherwise might be discriminated against or had a little bit of, who had to overcome a lot more obstacles, an opportunity, that white people cannot abide by. Like, I don't get it. So this channel isn't for Sargon. No. There's a video on your Twitter. Okay, so everyone, can you put out your Twitter? I know you put it up here before, right? So let me just, I think if I do this, you just have the @ sign. I think you can't put in the @ because of you not being a mod, but I can. So is this, yeah, there we go. People can go. I hope that works. Just knowing Kev is not child safe. Anything with Kevin on it is not child safe. Yes, as soon as Kevin is on a show, it is no longer safe for grandmothers and children under the age of 15. Using the hashtag YouTube walkout. Okay, so you guys can also check that out. I was a child, then I heard Kev's sexy dancing and my innocence was gone forever. I know you lost your innocence virginity to Kev's sexy dancing. All right. Well, I think we're running out of things, simply because that eventually happens, and we all have to move on with our lives and do other things with our day. I have another video I could edit for work, honestly, which will give me a nice head start. But I also just want to have a nice brunch. But anyway, you guys have your own problems and things going on. So let's see. Next week I should be back. That's fine. Once we get to the 29th of the month, this is going to be a little bit more, how should we say, touch and go, spontaneous. So what's happening is on the 28th of November, I am currently scheduled to fly to the UK to do field research for the British general election. And that includes the weekend of the 30th of November and 1st, and the 7th and 8th, and the 14th and the 15th. I'm looking to return back on the 18th of December. That's when I fly back. So I would be available for like a pre-Christmas Sunday show. Also, so when Christmas time here, as long as we're looking ahead to December, at least I am on my schedule. You guys can't see the camera I'm using or the screen I'm using, but I'm looking at the December calendar here. People often, every year, some of my friends are like, "Oh, you're on your own for Christmas. Why don't you come spend it with my family?" And honestly, like, if I find it exhausting to go and spend time with my family on the holidays, and that's because it's like traveling for a long time and sleeping in strange beds and living according to somebody else's schedule and watching things on television that I don't normally watch because they do, or doing whatever it is. It's that much more intense when I have to go and put on my best company behavior and be the guest in somebody else's house for their Christmas, where I don't know the traditions and I don't know what I'm doing, and that kind of things. And I just find it super stressful to be a guest at Christmas rather than just to be on my own. So I was thinking that for those of us who are like atheists and don't really care about the Christmas holidays but have the day off anyway, that I could maybe do a 24th and 25th and maybe even a Boxing Day. We'll see. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. But during the Christmas holiday, I might have a getaway hangout for all of us who really need to get away from the holidays because I'm going to be free the whole time. So just looking a little bit ahead, and I think that's about it. So I will keep you guys up to date. The field research hopefully won't completely fall apart. There have been a lot of, with the GDPR, there are new regulations, new requirements, and a lot of departments are all kinds of freaking out about what they have to do, and it's very busy, but hopefully I'll be able to do some field research, collect some data, and if I do, I will give you guys a little heads up as to what I'm finding in the British population, at least the sample of people who are participating in my study. So that's going to wrap up this episode of Weekend Winters, a purely political and a little bit of nonsense show for you today. Hope you enjoyed it. Yes, and so I think I can go over. Yes, and now I'm going to spend the whole day in my warm, cozy pajama tops. It keeps my ears very warm and my neck very warm, and I just love. So until probably another happy hour, and with the way the news is coming, guys, it's going to be, a happy hour every other day is not unreasonable, but we'll see what Kevin's schedule can handle and mine. Until then, or until next Sunday, whatever comes first, I've been Christy in a hoodie. You've been awesome. I hope you're as warm and snuggly and cuddly as I am. And until next time, I've been Christy, you've been awesome, and have a great week. Now, what I do have to do is remember that I need to get to a different window to end the video. You can watch me embarrassingly do that. Okay, is it time to end the stream? It's time to end the stream. Have a good day, night, afternoon, wherever it is, whenever it is you are, you guys. Okay,